Back for the second half of today's proceedings. So we wanted to kind of flip the day and give you guys a chance to ask questions to our panel of experts. So I'm going to pass the baton over to you guys. Are there any burning questions? In regards to kind of things you've heard, musings, things you kind of have observed, questions you want to throw into the mix? Now's your time to ask. Any brave volunteers? First up. Yes.
First off, thanks very much. It was really interesting and insightful. I have a question for the Redevco team, first off, if that's okay. I don't believe this. I know this works. No. I can hear you. I have a loud voice, so I can speak. I was interested to see the stats and the way that you talk about how you identify potential areas. By the same token, you talked about things like culture and engagement and how you view an area as being your ideal acquisition potential. What I didn't quite know is you talk about digital and you talk about digital engagement, but if the generations are getting older, there are going to be a higher level of older generation in that shopping environment. How do you think that they will feel with a digital engagement? I'm not being negative. This is kind of something that we think is quite important about making digital accessible for all. And when you look at this and you say, I can use my phone to kind of navigate through, that introduction point is vital. And is it right in every circumstance to actually use digital as a media to engage?
Super question. Question about digital inclusion, first off the bat. Marie, I see you're eating a sandwich, but I'm going to pass over to Baz if you're happy to tackle that one.
That was my first response. This is motive, so please pop in when you think. Digital is not the only answer, because I think it is an addition to, and it's becoming more and more complete what the customer wants, and the journey itself. So I think digital is a way to get people to a center or to the lanes in this way. And it's not just the only answer, because there still will be you or me maybe or others that just want to go there and they do not want to have it. But it's more like a hygiene factor. If you do not have it, it could be potentially have a negative impact for you. So you have to have it as an addition to also commercial, or to be there, marketing on site, or those type of stuff. So it's not black and white. It's a thing you also have to have, and we are playing around with all different types of digital things. We see that social networks are very strong. An app seems to be difficult because it has to keep new stuff. It has to be alive. There has to be something new. If you cannot give something to you as on the other side of the app, people don't use it anymore or don't look at it anymore. So you need to keep it alive. It has to be something new. So it's not an easy thing. And digital is of course a very big definition. So it's a journey, but it's not black and white. So yes.
Marie, did you have anything to add at all?
Yeah, well, I think you're pointing towards a very important trend. I think Asian is important for all our cities in Europe, definitely. We see, when we look at the consumer behavior, is that older people generally tend to spend less. That's a fact that we need to take into account. So the people that we are targeting are usually a bit younger and might be a bit more tech-savvy. On the other hand, I also see that, of course, technology is becoming very user-friendly. So, and of course, everyone is learning how to deal with it. So also older people. So it doesn't necessarily have to be. Well, I do recognize that just older people spend a bit less. So our target audience will be a bit more skewed towards the younger people.
Thank you. Can I just put that to the rest of the panel? Have you had any experience of kind of how maybe non-digital natives, hate that expression, have kind of used any of your products or services? Do you see kind of a drop-off? Any thoughts from your guys' side at all?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it. Is this actually working? It is.
It is, yeah.
I kind of alluded to it before, but I think possibly, I mean, it's part of my job is going around and understanding physical stores and how they work with retail. And I think that maybe 80% of the technology that I see in store does exactly the opposite of what it's been designed to do. I think it puts barriers in between people and the brand. I think it does it for three reasons. I think the first thing is we've got to try and understand what is the role of the physical store. And I feel that technology, thinking about screens or consoles or kind of iPads, they detract away. I mean, one of our clients is Burberry, and I think it drives me crazy every time I walk into their flagship store in Regent Street, and the first thing that happens is that somebody shows me an iPad, and we start looking down here. And surely the physical store is about the architecture. I should be looking up or around at the product, or picking up or feeling or interacting with real product. I could have that conversation down there, sitting on a park bench, but I'm in the store. So I think there's an issue around making sure that digital is really supporting a sort of genuine need and a genuine experience. I think the other issue, the second issue, is that a lot of technology in store is not actually yet particularly good, or maybe not as good as it will be in a number of years. And again, thinking about Burberry, they've been fated for their magic mirrors that respond to RFID tags and show videos that never, ever, ever work. Every time I go in there are error messages all over that screen, and there are salespeople saying, no, it never works, we have to reboot it. And I think part of that is the fault of the brands looking for cool kind of gimmicky tech, but it's not quite there yet. And the third area, which I think is really the most fundamental area, is that I think there needs to be a fundamental rethink in user journeys, in how people interact with technology, because you will all have smartphones, and on those smartphones you'll have a whole series of apps, but none of those apps come with an instruction manual of how to use them. You learn about the technology that works for you the same way that we as human beings learn about anything, through exploration and discovery, but also by making mistakes. And making mistakes is a very, very important part of the learning journey, but nobody wants to make a mistake and look like an idiot in front of fellow shoppers, which is why you see Marks and Spencer's spending millions and millions of pounds rolling out screens that show their website into their stores that nobody ever uses. So I'm okay with that, by the way. It sounds like a criticism. It's not. We are all learning about the way that technology works in store. Brands are trying to work out what kind of technology works. Agencies like mine are trying to design or second guess what kind of technologies might work. And critically, consumers are still trying to work out what technology they want to see in store. And we're not there yet. We will get there, but it's all a little bit up in the air.
Stephen, you were nodding your head. Did you have a... In agreement. In agreement. No worries, sorry.
Sit on the fence, in agreement. But no, it's interesting. So my hometown's Liverpool. I've got sort of more elderly parents. But they recently in Exchange Flags, they had a really sort of interesting thing. It's about, I mean, let's say, I agree with Jonathan earlier that VR often is a little bit of a barrier. It's not the most conducive of platforms necessarily to use in a shopping mall. But they had an interesting thing in the summer whereby there's a local VR company. They have a whole host of deck chairs out in the square, and people just take their own sandwiches. But they use the opportunity to actually introduce VR experiences to, I'm in my 50s, so I can say this, more sort of 50-plus Saga candidates. And it was promoting Saga holidays as well. So escape from the city to actually experience some beautiful location. So you could use this as an opportunity to introduce different age categories to new technologies, but you need to do it well, and it harks back to some of Bertie's comments earlier. Don't just leave them with them. You need brand ambassadors to navigate them through.
Thank you very much. Claire, can I ask you, just through conversations with Joe, is there any kind of, you mentioned millennials are a big user base obviously for Snatch. Are there any kind of surprise demographics? Like, I think Joe was talking about an example where there was a user and then his mum was stealing his boxes. Could you share with us at all?
Yeah, so the 70% of the Snatch user base is 18 to 30, so that core millennial group. Our second and fastest growing age demographic is moms. So yeah, as Rich said, there's an interesting story that you'd hear from users where this lad would go to bed every night and wake up in the morning and have no parcels, and it was always the same snatcher stealing from him. And he came into our help shift and was complaining and was like, clearly this user is spoofing or something, they're just targeting me, it's a joke. And it turned out that it was actually his mom, and she was waiting until he went to bed. So we've heard a lot about that, and I think the mom demographic are using Snatch because, and I agree, tech for tech's sake is, I don't think necessarily the way forward, but they're seeing the benefit of Snatch outside of everything before they get there, as well as then enhancing the experience when they're there, because it's real life offers and savings that are making their lives easier, which is why we've got such an engaged mom audience, because they're doing it for the family and they see the real value of the things that we're putting in the platform, which I think is why Snatch has had that success with that core and that slightly older mom demographic.
Thank you. Sorry, Alice. Superb ringtone someone has there. It was like you said the buzzword then for some reason. Any other questions at all? Who's got a burning question? Yes, the gentleman at the back.
Hi. So we read a lot about well, it's almost impossible not to read about the retail apocalypse. I'd just be interested to get some thoughts on what you think about that.
The retail apocalypse. Who would like to take that first off the bat?
Well, I think no one of us can ignore that it's there. I think we just need to be realistic about it. People are just shopping in a different way, and this also means that just part of the sales are going online. So this means that profitability of the store is becoming less. But I think this is also showing something else. So we are starting to discover, to rediscover what the true function of the store is, and that's not necessarily all about the transaction, but it's more about the engagement with products, with retailers, learning about their products. So there are a whole host of different roles that the store is having and is continuing to have. So for instance, what we're now seeing is that the most expensive space, for instance, in New York, is not being used to transact, which used to be the sole role of the store. But now it's being used to display products and to engage and to wow people. So I think what retailers are learning is that when they truly engage with the consumer, so they have an interaction that actually makes sense, they get stuck in the brain more. It also means that in a later stage, they will turn online and they will transact. So then it's more important about creating those memories that mean something to the consumer than having the actual transaction in store. And I think that's what we are learning from, is how will the store be used in the future and what kind of location choices come along with that. So what are the adjacencies that stores will need to have, or what does a retail environment need to do to still be interesting to the consumer?
Thank you very much. Stephen, you had a really interesting slide about the trillions spent in store. Do you have kind of a view? Is retail facing an apocalypse in your opinion?
I wouldn't necessarily think so. I mean, people are still spending. I think that the quote I also cited from Geometry, the shopper marketing agency, and the guy said, you need to start giving consumers things before. Just don't always focus. And I completely get it. Obviously, we're all in business, and there's a bottom line to this. There seems to be this race to get customers over the line, and I think. Is anyone here from Procter & Gamble? Oh, I'll just upset them anyway. But the old terminology is about moments of truth. Trying to migrate people from obviously Google's zero moments of truth to all. And I think we need to stop losing these mentalities. And immersive technologies are starting to give us the option to work around those traditional moments. And it's just to give them something beyond. It's easier in a retail space to do so. Maybe the individual retailers, especially independent retailers, might find it more difficult to engage and immerse people. But people continue to spend. Wherever they may spend that isn't necessarily, there's obviously people use the, omni-channel phraseologies. And I like, people like Farfetch are looking for this mystical offline cookie, which can bridge the gap between, physical bricks and mortar and, digital experiences.
Thank you. So I think there's an interesting angle there that maybe retail as we know it might be changing, but it's almost an evolution rather than a death. And I think kind of the slide that also resonated really closely with me is that additive kind of point, that giving value to customers is a really good starting point, and how kind of differentiation can occur. Any other views at all? Yes, thank you, Jonathan.
Firstly, the whole phrase retail apocalypse sounds incredibly Daily Mail, and so I'm always intensely mistrustful of that kind of phraseology. And that, by the way, is phraseology that's been spoken about every single year, all the way through this digital journey that we're all on. I think you're absolutely right. Retail is not dead. But it will have to change, and it will have to work out, what it's trying to deliver. But I'm always, and one of our clients is Net-a-Porter, and And another one is John Lewis. And I was in Net-a-Porter earlier having a conversation with them around stuff. And I always feel that Net-a-Porter is not a very innovative company anymore because it's purely online. And John Lewis has got a very, very good online presence, but it's also got physical stores which allow it to explore an entirely different area or element of its personality. And that element of personality is product and smell and touch and sort of engagement and everything that you simply cannot do online. So I think if retail was dead, then we as an agency wouldn't be having all of these conversations with Farfetch and Net-a-Porter and eBay and Amazon about how they can take their online presence and express it in a physical space. That to me suggests very, very clearly that pure play online players feel that there are some arrows in the quiver missing, and they would like to explore what that physical presence means. I do think, and I'm thinking about those online players and the conversations we have with them, I think one of the things that they are looking at, which I think is interesting and is an issue for physical retail, is James Hart, who used to work for ASOS, we would have conversations around the fact that ASOS recognized 30,000 different unique individual customer segments. When I was a physical retailer, we had A, B, C1, C2s and Es. And he didn't quite know what to do with those 30,000 segments. But what these online players are trying to do in their physical space is use that segmentation so they can bring the smartness of their digital offer to the physical space. So that might mean that if we're thinking about London, ASOS might open a pop-up in Canary Wharf and have product that's very closely tied to that demographic, which would be different to a pop-up in Chelsea and different to a pop-up in Shoreditch, and use the fact that they are agile and data-driven and lots of different things to different people to give each physical store their own expression and their own curation. And by the way, that's exactly what IKEA are trying to do at the moment. Move away from that enormous blue box outside the M25, which is a nightmare to get to, and all you get in return is meatballs. Trying to do something that's coming to your local high street that is very, very carefully curated to the needs of the people that are there. And I think that, again, is a really good example of physical retail surviving and thriving. And just at the end of this, I'm sorry, I will shut up in a minute, but every time I go to New York, I love buying books and physical books. And by the way, so does Mark Zuckerberg. If you read his blog about a year ago, he discovered this thing called a book, the physical, not the digital. And Barnes & Noble were closing stores all over New York. Last year, they started opening again, and they used to have Kindles on the ground floor, and they've swept them all out. And by the way, vinyl was outselling digital downloads not that long ago. So again, I feel the pendulum's coming back. We are humans. We crave real experiences, and real experiences are delivered best by brands in store.
There you go. Great answers, guys. Two hands. Max, I'm going to just come back to this gentleman at the back. Jim, your question, sir.
I was taken by Jonathan's presentation earlier when you spoke about the role of artists in your work. I'm really curious to discover a little bit more about how you see artists playing a role in this very human dimension of experience, which is going to be of benefit, hopefully, to all of us. Could you say a bit more about it?
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're often asked, what is it about luxury that makes it luxury? What is a luxury brand? And that's a conversation that it's better had over a pint of beer in a pub. But one of those aspects that I think is very important to luxury is justifying that premium. And the way to justify that premium is to talk about personality and all various aspects of that personality. And that translates to my ears as storytelling. So I feel that narratives are, and pieces of content that tell stories and educate and inform are really, really interesting. Now, there's so many different forms of digital. Digital, everything is digital. So digital has a rational side, it's got an emotional side, it's very good at kind of convenience, but it's also very good at storytelling. And very, very good storytellers for me are artists. Brands can sometimes be cautious and risk-averse. Artists are quite the opposite. Artists try and explore. Brands are sometimes wary about too much exploration because they're worried about what that might do to the brand. That said, and particularly post the recession of 2008, my client base, my luxury client base, has become more and more interested in deconstructing the notion of a brand and reconstructing it as a whole series of different types of conversations. So if you look at Burberry, for example, 60% of the marketing budget now goes into storytelling. And storytelling is interesting for them because it allows people to look at the brand in very different ways. And you can be black and white, you can do maybe VR, you can have stuff online, it can be about the history, the provenance, the craftsmanship, the sort of ethos of design. If you walk into any Louis Vuitton flagship now, on the top floor of all of those flagships, they've got an art gallery. Chanel have DJs in some of their stores now doing a sort of music thing. And sorry, terrible name dropping, but we had Karl Lagerfeld in the studio recently, King Karl, and he was saying that when he leaves, if he leaves, because Karl Lagerfeld has danced in the blue flame and will endure forever and ever, he is ineffable. But if he ever did leave, Chanel might not replace him with another named designer. Instead, what they might become is a kind of art shop, a kind of non-curated expression of storytelling and art and culture, and that each show might be curated by an art student or an architect or Philip Stark or a musician, and that actually what they want to explore is how far some of this storytelling can go, rather than the other way, which is the Louis Vuitton way, which is tightly controlled in a really hierarchical way, sort of reminiscent of the Empire in Star Wars. So I think, so that to me, again, is all about storytelling and exploration, and artists are not afraid to explore, and that's why we like working with them. The tools that we, I mean, to be frank, the tools that we explore with artists, we then repurpose and take back into our more sort of retail side, and it's typically the artist projects that inspire brands to work with us. And then we'll end up doing something a bit more rational.
Thank you very much. Brilliant answer. Just to flag as well, I think there's an interesting... We've been very fortunate to have a wide and creative brief when we've been working with Redevco. And there's a very interesting opportunity within the plot where there's a large space for an interactive... it's a magic mystery box at the moment for us to define. And so I think there's an interesting conversation for, the creative technologists that are sitting in this room to come and speak to us about ideas you might have, because we are very much looking at that kind of used expression of exploding out ideas from the technology. So hold that in your mind and do come and speak to us if that sounds like you. Any other questions? Sorry, yes.
Thank you. So I guess a lot of the examples have talked about kind of like adding value, kind of emotive, responsive to like immersive tech that's been used within retail. And I was wondering if, like, for me, that's I guess like more a lot on like the marketing side of things and kind of creating very kind of like emotive responses from people. With a lot of I guess like new tech, the kind of true adoption comes when it feels like it really solves like a problem or does something significantly better than the old way of doing it, and it doesn't feel like necessarily we've hit that, particularly with immersive tech. Is there anything like on your side, on the retail side, that you believe like desperately needs solving, like a problem that is aside from the marketing side of things that you think could really be solved by immersive tech?
A fantastic question. Guys at Redevco, would you like to kind of maybe start the ball on this one? So I think if I understand your question correctly, what's the business challenges? What are the unsolved problems at the moment that are keeping you up at night? Baz?
One thing that we are, and what we also try to solve with immersive tech is to attract people to an area, or to first of all get them there, and also second of all is to keep them there. That was with the dwell time as well. But another thing that we are really interested in is just measure people. We are looking for ways, and that's not the marketing, and that's not immersive tech, but that's from a totally different angle, is we are searching for ways how we can create, I don't know, Google has a similar thing, but it's registering cars. And what we want to have is something that registers people, without hardware, only with software. Because people can throw up iBeacons or Wi-Fi devices, but we are interested in 200 cities, X amount of streets, that's thousands of devices. So for us it is key to know how much people are walking in Oxford Street or Bond Street or that sort of stuff, and to see a trend. Is it decreasing? Is it increasing? And that's what we want to learn, not only here in London or here in Brighton, but also in other cities as well. So how can we throw a net over Europe and see where are what is growing if you're looking at people and what is declining. We have been searching for that quite some time now, and it's becoming closer. Mobile phone companies are now selling their data more and more. That's relatively new. Their granularity is 200 meters, 250 meters. For us, that's not precise enough because we really have to have at the address, at the meter. That's what we need. So we are still searching for the golden egg, but that is one of the other, one of the maybe most strategic things that we are searching for. It's Google Maps for pedestrians or for people. That's.
If I may, because I had a very interesting conversation with Nathan actually about some of the conversations come back to data almost, that kind of level of insight is actually a really interesting driver for retail. Does any of the panel do you have any views of how you've maybe used data or to kind of inform your work or kind of maybe solve problems for the clients and the brands you've worked with? Any takers? Snatch, Claire? Sorry, I'm throwing the microphone in your direction.
So I think that's one thing that Snatch kind of understands is vital. Not only who your customers are, so you know who they are if they're buying from you and you get them to sign up, as many stores try to now do. Can we have your email so we can send you your receipt rather than give you a printout, etc., things like that. But when we run any campaign with any brand, we build up a profile lookalike. So a brand will know where they are, what their interests are outside of that brand as a whole across multiple industries, sectors, where they go, what their routine is, because we work really closely with Google on that data. So we can build up this whole lookalike audience for our brands that we work with, which is obviously invaluable data to then go and retarget. Within the app, so we serve up an offer to a user, we can then close that loop completely by re-offering a secondary offer once that first one's finished. So, for example, say we were working with Cadbury's cream eggs and we did a free cream egg, so you go into store, you get a cream egg, and we would then know who's redeemed that, who's gone into Tesco's or WH Smith or whatever that retail partner is to pick up, gone and picked that up. We can then serve out another offer to them that's like, okay, you enjoyed it, here's 50p off your next one. So we close that in the data loop, which is obviously invaluable for a brand, so that we allow them to retarget, and that works on every level. Obviously, Cadbury's is kind of pinnacle at the top, but that works across all levels for all retailers. Likewise, in the space, you can increase the dwell time of those customers, gathering who they are, what they like to do, increase their connection and engagement within the brand, because when they're in the store, they can check in and we can serve them up other offers that might be tailored to them based on, machine learnings of who they are. So, yeah, Snapchat's quite a unique, I think, space in that market for that, and it's one that we're kind of expanding on.
Fantastic. I think kind of what struck me from kind of the previous question was that idea that the retail environment is a vastly more complex place, and therefore probably data might be a great solution to that problem. You had a question, sir. Sorry.
Just sort of tying into the whole evolution of retail thing. I was sort of chatting to a friend of mine the other day, and we discussed the difference between MR and VR in terms of retail. And I guess it's quite philosophical, but we sort of thought that VR is obviously by almost instinctively quite introverted because you're going into your own little, a world, whereas MR is kind of looking out into the world. So do you think maybe in terms of like actual, when you go, brick and mortar shopping, MR is the way forward for that, whereas out of home digital shopping, VR is the way forward for that, and how would you kind of tie that in with what you're doing at the moment?
Thank you. So, yes, right in there.
Actually, that question ties into your question too, which I think is really useful, because I think the answer to this is not MR or VR. The answer to this is to try and understand what is the future of omnichannel, and I don't think anybody's really understood that yet. So a lot of our clients think that omnichannel is about blurring the divisions between these channels. And let's forget mobile just for the moment. You can never forget mobile, but let's do online and let's do physical store. And then if you sort of have that thought in your mind, then you can have the convenience of a website, lift it up and put it on a screen in a store. But that kind of misses the point of what retail is all about, and that's why M&S are having trouble with no one wanting to go online in a store. But then thinking about VR, you're then going on the other side. So Ted Baker, for example, lifted a digital VR, or actually it was a 360. No, it was a VR view of walking into a Ted Baker Innovation Store and put that online. Now, again, I think that misses the point, because if you're going to buy a pair of socks, you don't want to put a headset on, walk into a store, walk down some stairs, realize that actually the socks are on the first floor, go up onto the first floor. That's not what digital does really well. Digital is all about convenience and speed and ease of search and a whole load of other things. And that kind of experience, I would argue, but I'm almost certainly wrong, I would argue it should be held within the digital space. And then we need to celebrate everything that physicality does, which is a more of a sensorial exploration and maybe a social exploration in the physical space. And I think the trick to all of this is when we start to understand what are the roles of these channels and then play to those channel strengths. And I just intuitively feel that the way not to do it is to try and replicate one somewhere else, because I could be walking around the Ted Baker shop, but I'm not really walking around the Ted Baker shop. I'm sitting on my sofa in my pajamas eating cornflakes on a Saturday morning.
Stephen, did you want to kind of touch on that at all? Do you see kind of where do you see the opportunity lie? Like, is working definitions around mixed reality, virtual reality useful?
I'll probably talk myself out of a job here, but I think those labels are really discouraging, and I think just concurring with Jonathan, but it's a case of there's a real danger of using the hardware to solve solutions rather than lots of our projects and the other speakers today. There's the collaborative projects that involve things like spatial audio as well as visualization tools, interactive screens and multitasking tables, and there's never one sort of solution. I mean, just in the pub last night talking about this amazing new eyewear store called Kite that was previously in Stratford, has now done away with all of their digital screens, and they've got a beautiful physical store in Shoreditch. And we were saying, I wish you could show you this eyewear, it's amazing. It'd be great in the future if we could just tap up a hologram on our mutual HoloLenses, and then I could show you this eyewear that I saw last night. But I think it's really dangerous to start labeling and guessing where the future is, and also try these things. We love the fact that sometimes, someone mentioned it earlier this morning, try these things, learn, create some new use cases and fail and learn. It's just called testing.
Great, lovely. I'm going to take 2 more questions on Bank Max's. Yes. Sorry, I'll come to you, John.
Hi, I was quite impressed that you think digital and deliver analog, but I believe that if you want to deliver the digital thing into analog thing, there should be an interconnection between the digital and analog. And how would you find these interconnections?
Lovely. So if I understand you right then, so the question is, how can you explore the mix between digital and analog, and is it not just one or the other? And how do you think digital? And that was from Jonathan's slide, I think. Jonathan, do you have a...
I mean, we look at, and again, I could be quite careful how I phrase this, but I think technology is a ghastly place of wires and cables and screens and processors. But I'm very impressed by what a powerful tool of communication it is. But I think we need to, what we try and do, in answer to your question, is denigrate technology to just another channel of communication. So there are lots of ways that brands can communicate to customers, advertising, PR, visual merchandising, direct marketing, what they do in store, things along those lines. And if you can push technology down so that actually almost it's invisible and hidden under the table, then I think you immediately get into a much more interesting conversation. And it's an interesting conversation about content and creativity and message and story. And those, personally, I feel are very sort of human ideas and sort of very motivating. And they're the kind of things that inspire me. And because everything we do is in retail, and I'm an ex-retailer, I'm very taken by the fact that we can take people on very powerful digital journeys that go into a store, but real people pick up real handbags, buy them, put them into real bags, walk out and wear them in real life. So we've got to find a way of getting people off the digital journey at some point and into the real world, because the end game of all of this, I think, has got to be the real world. So that's the analog bit. I don't want to buy a digital handbag. I don't want to drive a digital car. I'm very pleased that my children are analog and not digital. That's the kind of world in which I live in. I've got to try and find ways that digital can support that, but not replace it and not take it over. In the end, we are all fundamentally human. And I always feel that the most profoundly powerful technologies that I see, the really, really powerful ones, the ones that are sort of deep and really add value, they actually, ironically, sort of hide, they fold themselves, they disappear, they fold themselves into the way we live our lives. And the irony is that they almost teach us how to become more human. They actually sort of enhance our humanity. They don't take it away. And I was listening, actually, with Inition CEO to a lecture underneath the Tate Gallery last week from Janelle Lanier, who's the founder of VR, and he was asked a question about when are we all going to live our world in VR, and he said never, because he said no matter how good the VR experience is, we will take off the headset and real life will always be better, always. And I wanted to run up and hug him, but if you've seen him, he's a really, really big guy, and he's got dreadlocks that hang down to his ankle, and he's quite a terrifying character. But I was really pleased to hear him say that.
Thank you. John, lovely. Coming over.
This is honest. Jonathan, you just stole my question, because I was going to ask how long is it till we live in a VR world? It's a slightly loaded question because I work in live video, and I've agreed with everything that Jonathan has said until he said no one's really solved the omni-channel, because we think we have with live video, because it takes you into store with a live person still. It's using the technology, but it's still people-centric. So because you took my question, I'm going to have to think of another one really quickly.
Well, can I just say to that, I'm a big fan of live video too. We've just done a bit of work for Holition, a skincare brand, and they had a screen and they were showing video on it. But I was very interested in, I sold the idea, we made money out of live video, because again, brands are all about authenticity. And one of the great things about Holition is that they have these incredible, beautiful fields of lavender in Provence under that amazing sun. And so they've now hooked up a camera which is live recording it, so that what you see is there. And when you see some gnarly old French dudes in the tractor smoking a gauloise, it's actually real and authentic, and I love that kind of thing. And in terms of the Google Picture question, I mean, I want to hug my kids in all the time. There's a guy called Matt Drinkwater, who's head of the Fashion Innovation Agency at London College of Fashion, and he's a massive VR convert.
He's also a massive Star Wars geek as well.
And he often stands up and says he wants to live his life in VR. But then he's got a 7-year-old daughter, and he's never going to give her a hug in VR. We crave human responses, and that's kind of my starting point.
Okay, so maybe a question is then, there's obviously been quite a bit of discussion about being human-centric and not technology for technology's sake. So how, out of today, how are each of you going to apply that in what you do?
Question anyone want to take? So, John, if I understand you right, how can we apply a human-centric view to technology now? If I could expand it out maybe and say, kind of, where do you see technology going if we take kind of the mantra that human-centric is best? Where in like a few years' time do we see technology taking us in a retail setting? Is that okay? I've kind of... anyone want to tackle that one? Jonathan's back in there.
I would love to tackle that one, but someone else please.
I'll let Steve... I'll work along maybe. And,
I know we're getting times against us, but... I mean, no one really sort of alluded too much this morning to biometrics, the role of biometrics within immersive experiences. And again, it's about exploration. We don't have necessarily the right answers, and we're certainly not that, I'm certainly not that visionary to say it's going to be this, in X year's time. But, biometrics, I mean, we saw Jonathan's example earlier, the gentleman, the professor, actually doing skin grafts and sort of connected himself up. Understanding more about these experiences, whether it's VR or AR, but sort of using biometrics to get more insight and data, shopper insight and data.
Amazing. Okay. Do you have a view of where will the future take us?
Yeah, not clear yet where exactly it's going to end up, but what I do believe, and then it's all back to maybe the big data itself and the learning from it, because as well as consumers, for us it's learning what a consumer is doing and wants to do, and translate that back in applying services or giving services for them. So it is all about learning what is needed, learning what I like. Sometimes also you see when you pop up, you get a screen or something that already gives you back. Personalization. So you didn't know it yourself. So I still strongly believe in how can we translate and learn from everything what we do ourselves and give it back to ourselves.
A world where big data knows us more than we know ourselves.
Something like that.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about, because I completely agree with what you say about people knowing what the space is used for, and I think it comes down to bridging that gap between the virtual and the reality and utilising that and making sure that we're not cannibalising either channel when we do that. And I think it's just developing kind of the way that people will naturally develop. Everybody has a smartphone, everybody uses everything online, and it's just maximising that use and how can we link the two together and, like I said, bridge that gap. And I think that's the key question that needs to be kind of thought of.
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I've had too much coffee, or not enough either. No, I completely agree with you. I'm just going to say it in a slightly different way, but it's exactly the same point. I mean, when I was an old school luxury marketing director, and we were talking about this with someone over lunch, when I was an old school luxury marketing director, pre-digital, we used to talk at customers. We created a brand world, we had models, we told customers what to wear, how to wear it, when to wear it. We invited people into our sort of intimidating store, but it was always on our terms. We controlled all of that conversation. We spoke at customers. Now, that just seems wrong and it seems trite. And I think the interesting piece around digital is the ability through data to listen and not just to talk. And going back to the human element, if I'm a brand and I'm talking and then I'm listening to the feedback and then I'm moderating the way I respond to that feedback and then listening again to what I get back and responding again, but in a very moderated time or way, that to me sounds like a conversation. That sounds like if someone talks to me, I listen to the tone of voice and what they're saying, and then I change my behavior in my reply to fit in with what I think they might want to hear. That's a very, very human response, I think, and that's one of the areas that I find very interesting. And it's not the chatbot way of pushing makeup or that wonderful Justin Bieber chatbot, which had never heard of someone called Justin Bieber. Obviously, we're thinking now into... It wasn't self-aware now. We're thinking into a few years where some of this technology is far more refined than it is now. But that's where I think is really interesting. Brands allowing, or technology allowing brands to have individual conversations with every single individual person in this room, in this town, and out there, so that it feels more like that brand is talking to us, which is a world away from the old world of physical retail, which is like, here's all my stuff on a floor. I have no idea who you are or whether you will like it, but come along and have a look and see if you can buy something. Actually, to be able to personalize and curate that according to each of us individually, I think is really, really powerful. Scary, possibly, but powerful if we get it right. But anyway, as Spider-Man once said, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's up to us to sort it out.
Someone tweet that. I'm going to take very last question. Max, does your question still stand at all?
I think Jonathan was heading down exactly that route.
Lovely. No worries. I'm going to take... you've been very patient also. So, very final question. No pressure.
Hi, my name's Julia. I represent the Tourism Alliance in Brighton, which is a sort of group of tourism businesses, but also big retail spaces like Churchill Square, Brighton Marina, etc. And so it's been very interesting today, but one of the feelings I've got from it is that I can totally understand where you're coming from with the brand, that where you buy into a brand. Here it's slightly different because I think with retail, it depends on the city. Very much depends on the city. So here in Brighton, we have 300,000 people that live here. Probably a lot of those 300,000 people may go and shop in, our high streets, etc. We've got a lot of independent businesses here. And they may shop online, because shopping online to me is just buying something. It's not a shopping experience as such. So it's just a very technical way of seeing something, buying it and having it delivered to you. But in Brighton, we have 10 million visitors that come here. Of those 10 million visitors are coming here to shop, to eat, to visit the whole city. So they won't come here and be shopping online. So they will be coming here and shopping in their shops. And from the research I've done here, they want a shopping experience. They want really, really good customer service. They want things online where they can actually be able to eat there and so on and so forth. And where they want to use the digital side of things, because they don't know the city, they don't necessarily know where to go, they want to know that when they are shopping somewhere, where is local then, or very close by, that they can get something to eat, or even where the toilets are, or anything like that. So they are actually coming here for a shopping experience, which basically means they're going to be going into a physical premises. Things like, I totally understand with the Hannington Lane, it's about getting the footfall there and then keeping them there and making it a great experience for them. And for me, digital need to look at, again, they need to think in a very human way of themselves and what they want from an experience, rather than get so caught up in the technology of things that you lose your own humanity in it, that what you would do.
And I think that kind of takes us full circle almost nicely. So, Marie, did you want to kind of do a closing comment almost to, it kind of dovetailed what you were talking about earlier, I guess, in terms of Brighton as a location, as an experience almost. And I think you were echoing probably the panelists' comments around, let's not forget the human as part of this as well. Is that okay?
Just thinking about what... Yeah, well...
You were saying that it's a kind of wider question in terms of not every physical location is the same, and so that's probably something you have an insight around kind of from your wider research, that different retail environments are different.
Definitely, yes, of course. And indeed, I think here in Brighton, of course, it's the two customer groups also that you were mentioning are for us are important. So what we're looking for with the lanes is to connect, of course, with the people that are living here. And they're probably looking for different things than the tourists. But of course, the tourists are also equally important to the retailers that are there. So I think we have those different challenges also in our innovation challenge, and we need to look for solutions that tie into that. And I totally agree with the human factor. Of course, it's also a bit with the retail state of mind is how I depicted it in my presentation. It's really, we need to think about what is on people's minds and how we can help them and how we can interest them to come to our development. So yeah, but it's a journey, definitely. I mean, it's a lot about exploration and about being innovative and using our creativity to learn. So yeah, I would definitely welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to draw the line at our questions. Just a big round of applause for our panellists. And also, just a massive thank you for the brilliant questions that kind of were posed to the crowd here. So thank you very much for such insightful questions. I'm going to finally close the loop, and it follows on very nicely from what Marie and the lady at the back was just mentioning. So one of the reasons, obviously, we want to kind of share expertise and information in this space, but we have this live opportunity at the moment with Redevco. On your seats, you might notice there are some forms. If I can encourage you, if you were interested in kind of coming to talk to us, we would love you to fill in your details just so we can make sure that we speak to everyone who potentially could be interested in applying to the Innovation Challenge. Because, and I'll give you a bit of an overview of what that is, we're luckily partnered with Redevco. There's this opportunity that we have working with them in which we'll be looking to develop products and services, ideas from companies hopefully in this space, but also wider. And we want to have those conversations, even if it's early days. It could pertain to immersive technology in the wide scope in which we've kind of been talking about it today. But the important thing, I think, and where we've been discussing a lot of time kind of talking about is how can technology be used to deliver value for the shopper? And that's kind of the ideas that we're particularly interested and excited in hearing about. So if you're sitting there thinking, yes, I have something that will deliver a brilliant experience to a shopper, regardless of the technology, we want to hear from you. And the best way to do that is to fill in a form and hand it in, and also come and speak to us. So we are actually at close of the event. However, we've got this space if you would love to stay and network. We'd invite you to do so. Come and speak to myself, Rebecca, Rosalie, Marie and Baz, if you have any ideas that you want to kind of discuss around the Innovation Challenge. And a big final thank you for coming in and giving up your day. It's been fantastic to have you here. So thank you.